The United States government was created for these people. When they said we the people, they were not talking about these people. They were not talking about these people. They were not talking about these people. And they were most certainly not talking about these people. They were talking about these people and nobody other than these people. The American Revolution was a revolution led by wealthy merchants and plantation owners, and they were capitalists. And they set out to expand west to create their own capitalist states that they were united in defending and controlling. The working class was excluded from this project. It was capitalist states for capitalists, not for the working class. The reason why I point this out is because yes, it is important to understand the class war, but it's also important to understand the role of the state in it. Now, the state is the institutions within a territory that has the power to create and enforce laws. A few examples would be like the police, the FBI, or the military. They have the authority to enforce laws. Then you have these city council positions, local government positions, and congressional positions, etc., that have the authority to create laws. These are all simply parts of the state body, and the state as a whole is simply the collection of all of these institutions together. Now, the government, on the other hand, is the collection of individuals who operate these positions of power from within these institutions. They were either elected, appointed, or they just oversee it. Now, if the point of the class war, like I explained in the previous video, is to overcome the capitalist economy, we have to address the capitalist government, because it is the capitalist government that modifies the capitalist state. Because the government is the one who imposes the rules and laws on society, and they use the state institutions to enforce them. And because capitalists have always controlled the government, we have always had to fight against their interest. We had to fight to free enslaved people. We had to fight to be able to form unions. We had to fight to be able to voice our opinions and vote in their political system. We had to fight for a weekend off. We had to fight for better working conditions and higher wages and women's rights and civil liberties. And we've only always had to suffer, struggle, and fight for these simple demands because the government and the state were not established for our interest. They were established for capitalists and their interest. Now, the long fight against them has brought us to the point that we are at today, where we are now included in the political process. But does that mean that the government works for us and our interest? No. As you can see here, the average citizens only get what they want if it aligns with the interest of the rich. All of the laws and policies that are being passed through this country are being passed in the favor of the rich. All the wars that we are working to finance and fight are being fought and financed for the rich. All of the politicians that are being funded and brought to power are working almost exclusively for the rich and being financed by the rich at the same time, consistently. Now, when you have that understanding, it's a lot easier to comprehend why so many people from the working class believe that the government is against us. Because it kind of is. It always has been since the very beginning. The one thing that's not easy to comprehend is why so many people in the working class believe that the capitalist class is with them. It is not. We went over that in the last video. I imagine a large portion of that has to do with the fact that 1,500 newspapers, 1,100 magazines, 9,000 radio stations, 1,500 TV stations, and 2,400 publishers are all owned and controlled by 6 extremely wealthy corporations. Yes, 90% of the information that we see is controlled by 6 corporations, meaning capitalists control the narrative. And capitalists only make up 2% of the population in this country. The working class makes up 84% of the population in this country. Now, if capitalists control the narrative and the government and the economy, what is to be done? Well, a lot can be done if we consistently organize in the streets and occupy state seats. The point of the class war is to progressively overturn the capitalist state and turn it into a workers' state. And there is most certainly a lot of positive steps that we can take within the current framework that will get us closer to that, like joining your local socialist parties and organizing with them. But how can we ensure that the fundamental societal changes we make are not going to be undone or sabotaged by capitalist corruption or capitalist influence? Because the government, at the end of the day, is the dictator of society. They are the ones who impose the rules and laws on society. And if the capitalists control the government, laws will always be passed and enforced in their favor, which is why we want the working class to control the government, so laws and rules can be enforced and passed in our favor. This is why Marx stated that the first step in this revolution by the working class has to be to raise the position of the working class to the position of ruling class, so we can win the battle for democracy. And democracy is either going to work for us or it's going to work for them. Because if the government does not work for us, we are not going to win this class war. Which brings us right back to the original question of how can we ensure that any fundamental societal changes we make are not going to be undone or sabotaged by capitalist influence? Well, if we are to make gradual reforms towards socialism in the liberal framework of our existing system, then I believe Vladimir Lenin was right when he said, if socialism can only be realized once the intellectual development of all people permit it, then we will not see socialism for at least 500 years. Because it will be a long back and forth struggle against capitalists and their governments and their media. It'll most certainly be a long journey of hurdles, losses, and gradual reforms. I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue every avenue possible, but for democratic socialists, this is where the question of capitalism and the state ends. Now, for those with more radical views, like Lenin, there is another solution, which we are going to go over next. Lenin's addition to Marxism, the vanguard. So stay tuned.